Peace, boxing fans. Thanks for clicking on another Bite Down Boxing podcast or video. I'm the host of the Bite Down Boxing podcast, R.L. Woodson, or just Wood. Wow, the boxing calendar is kicked off. Last night we had our first Showbox card of the year, headlined by 20-year-old rising prospect slash now contender, self-proclaimed contender Devin Haney. And obviously, you know, we have a big one coming up next week. But look, let's jump into it. Devin Haney taking on 28-year-old undefeated Xolisani Ndongeni. What'd you think? This fight took place down in Shreveport, Louisiana. Seems like a bit of an interesting location for the fight, with Haney being a West Coast product, with him fighting out of training at and residing in Las Vegas. Just seemed like an odd location for the fight. And then if we take into consideration, if you saw Regis Prograis' first debut with the World Boxing Super Series, his quarterfinal matchup that was held in Louisiana, I believe in New Orleans, the crowd was pretty light. So just like I said, with me being in the middle of the country and wondering why, well, I know why, but being frustrated sometimes that more fights don't take place, you know, in the flyover states, in the heartland. Just wondering why they picked Shreveport. But that's where it was. Went down in Stageworks, I believe was the name of the venue. But let's jump into it. I won't talk about the opener or the debut of Ruben Villa, who was successful in his fight. But let's just stay with the main event. Opening round, you know, Xolisani Ndongeni, he promised to test young Haney. He's a South African kid, 28 years old, like I said, undefeated, not too heavy-handed, but of course he was 25, 25-0 going into this thing. He said he was going to outbox Haney and figure out a way to get to the victory, and he opened up pretty decent. You know, I was giving him the first round, maybe up into the last 30 seconds. I thought he was out jabbing Haney, being more aggressive and trying to impose, you know, his experience on the younger Haney. But then at the end of the round, Haney just exploded. And, it wasn't like he was losing by a wide margin, just working behind his jab and filling it out. But, you know, it was a huge rally to close the round, and that kind of set the tone for the rest of the fight, in my opinion. It was like Ndongeni lost his, gave up on trying to be the boss of the fight or take the lead. One thing that I noticed very early in that first round was Ndongeni's kind of had a high guard with a really wide hand positioning. Seemed like he left a lot of his body open, and I thought that would have been something that Haney looked to exploit, but he really didn't until the latter part of the fight. And that might have been because in round two he got in a bit of some inside, or as they moved within range of one another. Ndongeni opened up the second round with a good left hook, right hook up top. It's a left hook to the body, and then a right hook up top. That probably was his best work in the first half of the fight. And then immediately after that was when maybe he got a little too confident with that combination, got in range, and was knocked down by a short right hook by Haney that kind of caught him, not with his feet crossed up, but a little bit off balance, kind of contributed to it, but he went down. And, you know, he got up pretty quickly, and that was pretty much the end of him really pressing Haney. Yes, it kind of seemed to reset Ndongeni's, you know, attack for the rest of the fight. I think once it got into round 3 and 4, like I said, there was not enough body work from Haney. Seemed like he got into his styling a little bit, just jabbing. He did have a great final minute in the 4th round. You know, I have to kind of wonder if maybe the well-known Teofimo Lopez first round knockout of Mason Menard, a previous opponent of Haney, I kind of wonder if that demonstration kind of had Haney looking to do something big and something that he may not be capable of. And I don't think he's not, you know, a one-hitter quitter type puncher. But I think if you look at the 2nd round knockout, it was a punch that was kind of off script, unexpected, and it got the knockdown. And I think the rest of the fight, he was just trying to walk Ndongeni down and just kind of firing mostly singles, maybe a double here and there, but very rarely did he get to the 3rd or 4th punch in a combination. And I just think that's giving your opponent a chance to see everything that you're hitting him with. And if you just flat out don't have, you know, game-changing power in both hands, that's going to be a kind of a difficult way to get the knockout or get a knockdown or badly hurt your opponent. So whereas opposed, if you're countering very sharply, or you're running your opponent into something, or you're just hitting him with something that he doesn't see. And that's kind of the reason why I think you got to get to that 3rd, 4th, or 5th punch in your combinations to kind of create that moment. But a very dominant performance. You know, I don't have much to knock Haney on throughout the course of the fight. You know, one thing I'll say, I disagree, or I don't know if I agree, I would say that, with Raul Marquez, one of the Showtime commentators, about Haney growing into his man strength. Is that mythical? I mean, Tyson was knocking out grown men at what, 19 or 20? So, I mean, if you don't have it, you just don't have it. But I don't think that's a knock against him necessarily. He can be very successful. He can go somewhere in the game. But you're gonna, like I said, you're gonna have to create these knockouts and do things differently, versus if you have that home run, you might have to manufacture some runs. You might have to manufacture knockouts. And it's funny because a couple of weeks ago, Floyd Sr., I believe, put out the something on social media, or just a comment about Haney's power at, during the build up to this fight, and he said he was hurting him through the chest guard or whatever, and that was cool. It adds to some some conjecture for the fight, it's some publicity, sets it's something to get to create a buzz for the fight. But then, like I said, in that ring is where the truth really comes out. And we had already seen the Burgos fight. He went deep into the fight with Mason Menard. Like, you're just not smacking fire out of dudes. I mean, that's just not his game. So, but again, like I said, added that body work in the 5th round. He was really backed Ndongeni up a couple of times and seemed to hurt him with some of the body work. Ndongeni was breathing through his mouth. Round 6, you saw Haney looking to get off to land the left hand and then step off to the side to get to some angles. I heard his father, giving him some praise for that. but still not a lot of combination punching through that point. Around 7, Ndongeni kind of pressed forward early, got Haney in the ropes a little bit early in that round. One thing that, you know, Ndongeni was trying to do throughout the fight was land the overhand right, and I thought there was a chance to connect with that earlier in the fight when Haney was looking to looking for to land the big shot early and had his head a little bit more stationary. But there were times here and there where Ndongeni did land the overhand right, but I don't think that Haney's defense was ever totally irresponsible later in the fight when that punch was coming. He did knock a couple of them down or parry them, and then he got out of the way of others. But big flurry to close the round in 8, at the end of round 8 by Haney. And then I think to close out the final 2 rounds, I think a very smart, which goes to what I was saying earlier, some great instruction from Haney's father as well as Big Floyd, but mainly from the father. From his father was get your head in his chest, get him to the ropes, bang the hell out of his body, snatch his body away from him, and then land some shots up top, and you can create the chance to get him out of here. And I think it was in that round 9 where we saw some of the infighting early on, and he got that head on his chest and ripped, you know, some left and right hooks to the body, and it did look like a moment. It did look like a moment, even back in round 10. I'm just looking at my notes. The last minute of round 10 was when he had his chest headed in Ndongeni's chest and was beating up his body pretty good, and then landed some headshots that stunned Ndongeni, and it looked like the knockout was possible. So like I said, I just feel like to sit here and fight a person straight up, landing 1s and 2s, I don't know if Haney's gonna get his knockouts that way on most opponents, but if you get more physical, and that's what I don't know if the man strength thing is something that could actually happen as we move forward with Haney, but maybe if you just grow more comfortable being more physical and learning how to, and growing comfortable in imposing your will on opponents, like, you know, maybe you can get in there, get your head on somebody's chest and really chop them down, and then break a fighter down and create that knockout. And I just say, in contrast, around before Christmas, you know, I went down to the fight locally here in Ohio and caught Cleveland's Charles Conwell in action, and he's at super welterweight, and him and his opponent, they opened up jabbing him just a little bit, but then Conwell quickly moved the action inside, went chest to chest, put that pressure on his opponent, banged his body up, and just imposed his will on this guy who was a much more experienced fighter than himself. And he eventually just busted the guy up, broke him down, and the guy ended up quitting in the 3rd round. Manny Woods was his name. The article was out there at Bite Down Boxing if you want to check that out. So that's what I'm saying. You know, every fighter's going to have his own style and fight these fights in the manner that they're comfortable with. But like I said, if the knockout isn't coming from working outside, working mid range, and just sitting here exchanging, you know, pop shotting, you might have to get your hands a little dirty and create that knockout. So I wouldn't say that the jury is out on Haney, that the power isn't there, that he's limited, etc., etc. But anyway, you know, he won the fight 100 to 89, 100 to 89, and then 99 to 90. I think I had it 100 to 89 is how I scored it. But after the fight, and I'm almost done here. After the fight, he tells, I guess it was Steve Farhood was in the ring, and he tells him that I am a effing contender. And I think Farhood asked him, well, you know, who would you want to see here? Who, you know, what champions would you want to see? And that's when I think things get kind of crazy for a couple of these guys. I think Roach, isn't Lamont Roach? Is he at 135 or 130? Teofimo Lopez, you know, some of these younger prospects, you know, lightweight is, you have unified champion Vasily Lomachenko, and then you have Mikey Garcia. And then we're getting ready to get our third champion, the IBF champ, when Richard Cohe and Isa Chaniev get to fighting. And I guess that's who the target is for Haney, is maybe the winner of Cohe and Chaniev. But yeah, I mean, to just say bring those guys on, line up the champions at lightweight, you know, that's a daunting task right now for, you know, anybody up and coming. So that's that, man. I don't have much more to add to it. I already went a little longer than I wanted to, but what's new? Obviously tomorrow we have super middleweight champion Jose Uzcategui versus Caleb Plant in his first bid at a world title. That's on FS1. I believe action gets started at what, 6:30, I believe, the preliminary, 6:30 Eastern time. So you know, on this NFL playoff weekend, it's good to see some boxing mixed in here, and trying to be smart with where they have that and what time they have that set up. I might go ahead and do a Bite Down Boxing podcast. That was my plan, an audio version today. Now that I saw the Haney fight, you know, that gave me some stuff to talk about. And then obviously the Uzcategui and Plant fight tomorrow night. So there are some things to discuss. Not my big interview, but my special guest earlier in the week that I mentioned on another video, that did not happen, which I didn't have a lot of faith in it. Anyway, we did have a phone call, but of course the phone call to get that to get the interview done is always very tricky. So it is what it is. But look, man, I'm gonna get ready to get out of here. You see what all the social media is on the video, at Bite Down Boxing everywhere. I think that says it all. And hey, I'm out of here. 1